So what I wanted to do is, in my class, I go over a few things, and I've done these videos before, ladies and gentlemen, separate videos on each particular one, but I'm going to kind of put it as a hodgepodge all together on this particular day in this particular video. And first thing I got my 1911 9mm, and I've got it loaded with dummy rounds, but I took the mag out, but I'm going to check the chamber anyway just to make sure the weapon's clear. The weapon is clear, okay? And the first thing we're going to do is understand cartridges. And we were talking about this before, verbiage, how it's very important, Trey. There's a lot of times people can say things, and in general we get the general idea, but if I'm on radio just trying to describe things, and I say one thing, but in reality I mean another, people may get confused. So let's talk about cartridges. Cartridges, some people call them bullets, right? Well, in reality, the bullet is the projectile. A cartridge or a round contains components, and those components are the bullet, the projectile, the shell casing made out of brass, aluminum, steel, whatever, a primer, and gunpowder. So when the cartridge goes into the chamber of the gun and you pull the trigger and the hammer falls, the hammer hits the firing pin, or if it's a striker fire, the pin is released. It hits the primer. The primer is then caused to spark. The spark ignites the gunpowder. The powder burns, builds up pressure, and then it pushes the projectile out of the weakest part of the gun, which is the muzzle of the barrel. Okay? So there you have the components of a cartridge. Sometimes, though, cartridges can cause problems as well as other things. So the first thing we're going to talk about, the first type of malfunction is going to be a stovepipe. Some people may not know what a stovepipe is. If you look at a wood-burning stove and you look at the pipe that goes up to the ceiling, you'll notice it is in sections. Well, consider each one of those sections a shell casing. Like you shot a cartridge and the bullet's gone now and you just got the empty shell casing. Just picture those stacked one on top of the other. Well, in the video here, I'm showing, I don't have an empty one, so I'm going to use a dummy round with the head on it. But it sticks up like this, where it's sticking up vertical from the gun. What causes a stovepipe? If we can understand the mechanics of a firearm, we can get it back in action a lot quicker. Now, I have a formula here. I'm going to show it on the screen. It's Aaron's formula for success. M plus M equals RT. Mindset, if you're into what you're doing, plus the mechanics. If you understand the mechanics of how things work, it's going to give you a better response time. M plus M equals RT. Mindset plus mechanics equals response time. So let's learn mechanics. Here we've got a 1911 and we've got a stovepipe malfunction. What are some of the things that can cause a stovepipe? Well, first of all, probably the top thing is the gun is dirty. If the gun is not sliding smoothly, if there's a lot of grit, gum, grime, it can slow the slide down to the point where it doesn't have enough energy to kick the cartridge out of the chamber and the ejection port, okay? Or let's say you're limp wristing. Limp wristing is where my hand is down here and the gun's flipping in my hand as compared to holding it nice and firm. Another thing could be the cartridge itself did not have a good powder charge. Instead of it going bam, 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 it just went bing, bing, bing. Just didn't have enough energy to push the slide to the rear, and it causes this malfunction. Now, what's the trick? How do we clear the malfunction? Well, if we're in a firefight, we'll say, and the first shot goes off, but then we try to pull the trigger again and it doesn't work, the first thing I'm going to say is probably a curse word, and then the second thing I'm going to say is the acronym SPORTS. I took sports from the military because they use it for an M16 rifle, and I've applied it to a pistol. Sports. Slap. I'm going to slap up on the magazine. I could have accidentally pushed the magazine release button and it pops out, so I'm going to slap up on the mag. P is for pull. I'm going to pull the slide to the rear, and hopefully the trash will come out, the empty shell casing. O, observe. Is it clear? The chamber's clear. Everything looks good. R is release. T is take aim. S is squeeze the trigger. You're back in the game. Sports. We're going to use the word sports for all of our malfunctions, okay? So you've got a basic stovepipe malfunction, and that's how you clear it. On Tuesday, you can check out the video to see how it works. The next malfunction is one of the worst, and that's called a double feed. In the video, I want to show you that this generally happens when you release the magazine. Most guns will do this. I'm pushing the mag release button, and the magazine is going to drop right out, okay? Most cases, unless they're designed not to do that. Now, I'm going to put a round in the chamber, dummy round in the chamber, pretend that it's empty. I'm putting the magazine into the gun, and I'm dropping the slide forward. On the video, you'll see I've got the shell casing in the chamber and I've got another round trying to go in. That's a double feed. A double feed is when you shoot the gun one time, it fires, the slide comes to the rear, but the extractor slipped off the shell casing and did not pull it out. The slide comes all the way to the rear and then comes back and strips off a brand new round, but it can't go into the chamber because that empty one's still in there. That's a double feed, and that's a mess. What we've got is we've got a few points of stress on this gun that we have to release. I've got my guide rod spring that's compressed now because the slide is not in full battery, so it's compressed. I've got the magazine spring pushing up another round, and I've also got the round that's on top trying to go in the chamber halfway off the magazine, catching on the lip. I have to relieve the stress. First thing I'm going to do, lock the slide to the rear. Manipulating my slide stop, locking the slide to the rear. I just took off the stress from the guide rod spring, which is going to allow the mag to most likely drop easier. As I do that, the cartridge or the empty shell casing that was in the chamber on this particular moment fell out of the chamber, but I'm going to check it again. It is clear. You'll notice that round on the top here is partially sticking off the magazine. I have to what they call reset it, put it back in. All the while, I'm indexing the weapon. I'm keeping it to the side now. It's in line with my line of sight. So now that it's clear, I insert the mag back into the weapon. Gun's still in my line of sight. I straddle the slide, and now I'm back in the game. That's called a double feed. Double feeds are one of the worst because it takes a lot of time. However, you should be able to do this with your weapon without looking at it. And the reason being is if you're looking at your weapon and not the threat's going to do something you don't know. He may come behind you and then you're kind of screwed, right? I'm going to try and show this on video here and describe it. I'm looking at the threat. I have a double feed. Sports, I slap up on the magazine, pull the slide to the rear and observe that I've got a double feed. Instead of me taking my eyes off the threat, I know my weapon, I know how it works. I'm going to maintain the focus on the threat, lock the slide to the rear, drop the mag, I hear the trash come out, a real quick check to the chamber, it's clear, reset, indexing the weapon, gun's in, and I'm back in the game. I'm not looking at the gun trying to figure it out. Very important that we learn how to do that. Now the last one is this. This happens sometimes. I don't know why it happens. I think it's because people ride the slide. And what I mean by riding the slide is when the slide is locked to the rear, instead of grabbing the slide, pulling it to the rear, and letting it go, they grab the back of the slide and ride it forward slowly. And when they do that, the cartridge kind of jiggles and bounces out of where it's supposed to be. And when that happens, you have this problem. Now if you'll notice in the video, I got a muzzle break on it, but if you'll notice right here how the slide, it's all together, right? No, actually look at the back side. The slide is in line with the frame of the gun. Okay, that's the way it's supposed to be. Now when I put a cartridge in it and we have a reverse extractor malfunction, the extractor got behind the cartridge. Every cartridge has got that rim around it. The extractor goes in the rim and that's what carries it in and pulls it out. But if for some reason it slips and gets behind it, this is what's going to happen. You'll notice that the gun is not in line with the frame anymore. It sticks out about 1/8 of an inch. And that's about the distance that that rim is on the shell casing. Okay? So how does that happen? It's probably because you're riding the slide forward. There's two ways to fix it. You can either pull back a little bit on the slide, let it go, or you can bang it in like that. Banging it in on the back side of the slide doesn't always work. So what I like to do is pull it back, the slide, and let it go. And it still didn't work. Actually, it did. Okay? That's the best way to do it. If not, you just got to do a full rack of the slide and get your gun back in working order. But those are 3 different types of malfunctions, and I've got those videos on each malfunction all by themselves. But in this video, I showed it real quick to explain to the gentleman and the people that were listening the few different basic types of malfunctions that happen with a firearm. So you got the stovepipe, double feed, reverse extractor malfunction. Trey, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to play a replay of Master Cindy Key doing something physically abusive to me to help you protect yourselves on the street.